Move to question 18. Call on the Honourable Member for Arbory, Castletown, Malew, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. I would like to ask the Minister for Justice and Home Affairs in what circumstances it is a legal requirement for a minor to wear a mask on a school bus, and if she will make a statement. Thank you.
Minister for Justice and Home Affairs to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. The Public Health Protection Coronavirus Regulations 2020, made under the Public Health Act 1990 and as amended and approved by Tynwald on the 7th of December 2021, set out under Regulation 6A that a face covering is mandatory when travelling on public transport, except where an exemption applies or where a person has a reasonable excuse. The exemptions to the legal requirement to wear a face covering include where a person is a child under the age of 12. I also understand that the conditions of carriage for buses set by Bus Vannin as operators of buses currently require all passengers of 11 years and over to wear a face covering. I do not intend to make a statement. Thank you, Mr President.
Supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President, and thank you, Minister. In terms of a legal requirement being in place, has any assessment been made by the constabulary in terms of this difficult position that minors are being given a legal requirement to follow, but at the same time the impossibility for the constabulary to get directly involved, the challenge that we've already heard from the Infrastructure Minister of policing it within the existing system? Is this something that the Department of Justice and Home Affairs is aware of being a really difficult position to actually find a solution to, or is there a solution to it? Thank you, Mr President.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. I think referring to my honourable colleague, the Minister for Infrastructure's previous replies, obviously he has said that bus drivers are talking to people as they board the buses and asking them to comply with the requirement. In terms of constabulary involvement, obviously how the police enforce our laws is a matter for the Chief Constable. I will say, though, that the police's approach from the start of the pandemic, including not only the emergency powers legislation, but also latterly our legislation under the Public Health Act, has been to focus on engaging, explaining, encouraging and educating, and only finally enforcing. That is, enforcement remains an absolutely last resort option. And I think it's also important to note that the public have largely engaged with the statutory requirements and the non-statutory expectations regarding wearing face coverings in other indoor places. And indeed, although the Department of Infrastructure does not collect the data, clearly what the Minister for Infrastructure has said is that by and large the public respond when drivers ask them to comply. So it would be my view that it would be inappropriate to take a draconian approach to this, but to continue with our current policy of engagement and encouragement. Thank you, Mr President.
Final supplementary, Mr Moorhouse.
Thank you, Mr President. Thank you, Minister, for that reassuring answer. Does the Department recognise the potential issues of a legal expectation being ignored by such a large number of a certain age group? And given that risk, is it something that the Department has raised with other areas in terms of having a piece of regulation that has potential long-term damage in terms of how we respect the law and how we follow the law? Is that something that has been under consideration? Thank you, Mr President.
Minister to reply.
Thank you, Mr President. I think I would refer to the comments made by the Chief Minister earlier today, which is that with all of these matters, they are constantly under review and we are constantly considering the community's response and what is appropriate to meet not only our public health needs, but the wider needs of our society. And in that respect, we keep these things under regular review. Thank you, Mr President.